I see miracles happening every time I open my freezer. If water was the holy grail, its contents would be light. Water's not reading words, but it appears to pick up some kind of that information. When I woke up, there were doctors around me and they were like, well, you didn't recover well. You now have showers of blood clots in your lungs. I started putting myself on 2-week trials with naturally alkaline water. And within 3 days, I noticed a change. If you heal yourself, you naturally start to heal others. Water in the air is so important because it has a relationship with the electrical charge that we put out, giving us a web of liquid crystal information exchange. Every water molecule in our body is working for our highest potential. Water is a mirror of the divine, and we just barely know anything about water, which means that we hardly know anything about ourselves or our own potential. I'm seeing that water is responding, not reacting to me. I have over 54,000 photos of water responding in an intelligent manner. What if this is not water memory? What if this is water dreaming? What if this is water imagining? I found something that's going to change the world. I've put a little bit of focus into 2 areas lately. One is dew, D-E-W, dew. We say dew, Americans say dew. So, but I find that type of water is a water we don't often think about, talk about, but we just take it for granted, and yet it is referred to in biblically, for example, as relative to the Holy Spirit. It is the first water that sees the sun. Victor Schauberger talks about it as being a water of levity, and how interesting it is in that when you look at dew, you see that it's just on top or on the very end of a blade of grass sitting there. And how is it doing that? How did it get there? Because it's not exactly appearing in the same way that rain happens. And I've been looking for videos to see how it forms, and I haven't found any on the internet yet. Maybe there are some, but they're not so obvious. But when Victor talks about it, Victor Schauberger, he talks about dew as being this very, very new water. And he seems to say that the plant has a kind of plasma-y type substance that as soon as the sun starts coming up, it kind of creates the dew. He says that this plasma bit kind of fills up, and then the dewdrop is there, and it's always on top of the leaf or on top of the grass, which is interesting because, normally that would just kind of fall off or fall down. And that happens when the sun fully embodies the water, and then it falls down. It has levity. But he was an amazing observer, and really, talks so fluently, elegantly about implosion and explosion, those differences. And he also said something which I love, which some people may not have heard about with Victor Schauberger, in that he said that he would sit by a stream in a meditative state, and he kind of fell unconscious, came back and realized that what he termed as his free consciousness was taken away by the water down the stream and brought back, filled with information about the water. And over his life, he would sit by the stream, and he would say he would send his free consciousness out on these expeditions, and it would come back with all this information, which was how he got to understand what water liked. And he said that that's how he came to understand the different temperatures that water likes, the levitational aspects of water, which led him on to his work with anti-gravity devices. And so there's so much there. He said that in every drop of water is the Godhead. And so I have been going outside early in the morning, barefoot, to collect the dew, and I'm knocking the dew into my petri dishes, and I'm going and I'm freezing it to see what I'll see. And so for anyone that doesn't know me, I I freeze water to a certain stage of freezing. So it's a very short-term method. So the water is not a solid exactly. It's called liquid crystal. And with what the fascinating thing that I'm seeing is that as the ice is just beginning to melt, it melts around the outside, and the outside creates these tubelets. And all these little particles, which could be air bubbles, but they look like particles, start rapidly moving around to go down through these tubelets, which look like a bit of a trunk of a tree that would be see-through. And you can see that the particles go both downwards and upwards. And it's very clear that you can see that the fluid, that's the melted part, has become plasma as opposed to liquid. So fascinating stuff. So I'm very interested in that. The Vedas talk about dew as well, and it's how special it is. So I love the in-between things, the subtle nature of water. And I've always said that the secrets are in the subtleties. So there's that aspect. Then the other thing I'm excited about doing is that relatively recently, I've got a small group of people globally to help me with a project whereby whenever I freeze water using my method, and I've been doing this now for a decade, what we see is that 7 times out of 10, we'll see a specific pattern, whether we use an influence like a word, or whether we use no influence at all. So this pattern appears to be something that happens organically in water. Now, what I understand about this specific pattern, which looks like coding, it looks a lot like ancient cuneiform or hieroglyphs. It has lines going one way and then lines going horizontally, and there's information in between. Anybody that sees it believes that it looks like coding. And so when I use the word, and as we will evolve this conversation, you'll understand I've used many, many things. Words, written words are one of them. Pictures, music, all manner of things. Words are powerful ways of which we have learned how to communicate very quickly. And so by writing a word, there is an information that comes from that word. And water is not reading words, but it appears to pick up some kind of that information. Same word in lots and lots of languages. I'm not just using English. And we see the same patterning. So for the word information, I see this coding pattern that I've just been talking about. But even when we're not using that, it's the only pattern I see that appears organically. And so my feeling, my thinking, is that perhaps, anyway, what we might be seeing is water's information coding, constantly updating its information. And that we can potentially, if we use the ancient languages that it resembles, and as a kind of Rosetta Stone in a way, and then perhaps feed that information into an AI system, and then see whether or not they can start recognizing the repeated patterns in the ice that I'm doing, and start perhaps being able to decipher some of the information that's actually written in the ice, essentially. This could be a really, really big deal. And this leads into the concepts and potentials of the Akashic records.
Yeah, that's there's so much in there. And even just the way you described the Akashic records are actually, I don't want to say housed in water, but carried through the water rather than just being something out there. It was such a beautiful invitation to just come back in to do your work, right? Like spiritually as well, because it's like, oh yeah, the water's in me, and like connect to the inside of the water, and the Akashic records are in there. There's this really trippy question that's emerged for me, which is, ancient cultures for the longest time have prayed to the water, and infused so much of their deepest reverence into what they believe to be incredibly sacred, right? The waters. And I'm just wondering, potentially, have you considered that, because water, like you described, and especially salts, you've got an interesting relationship with salts as well, not just water, but salts as well. And they're carrying this memory. And maybe those are the memories of the prayers that are being unlocked. Like, have you considered that to some degree, or am I just drawing parallels? Like, are you picking up on
Oh,
the
no,
prayers?
yeah. Well, I mean, over the last decade, I've thought about many, 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 many things. Studying water is studying life of all of its natures. And so, prayers, yes, thoughts, dreaming, all of it. But there's this term, water memory, water memory, water memory. And I, I, I was talking about Gennady Krokalev on another podcast the other day, who was this Russian scientist, and um, he was studying this phenomena about the retina of the eye being able to project holographic information that can be captured on camera when someone has a very clear thought in their mind's eye. And what's interesting about that is that he originally discovered this because he was reading a magazine called, in English translation, See the Other Way Around. And I keep hearing this, see the other way around. The world is sort of upside down in its thinking. And so I'm constantly revising what I've thought. And so one of the things that we hear all the time within certainly the world of water and consciousness, if you're interested in those things, is this word, water memory. But what if it's the other way around? What if this is not water memory? What if this is water dreaming? What if this is water imagining? And there's a lot of what ifs, but I think a lot of what we're looking at is round the wrong way. And so my responsibility to water is to open myself up for new thinking and to let water come through me to essentially share something that is innate within all of us, which is this divine light. Because I think that when you're working in the realms of water, there's two things about light that really resonated with me. There's many more, but two main ones. One was there was an Indigenous woman that said she could speak to bees. And she said that for a long time she would stare at beehives until a bee came out and somehow communicated to her and said, "We don't mind you looking at our hive, but please just stop looking at it for such a long time because your conscious expression is putting too much light in the hive and we like it to be dark."
Yeah.
So where you put your conscious expression is where you're putting your light. And they didn't like the constant looking because it put too much light in the hive. And so the other part about light is that my method is very short. So it takes about 5 minutes and 20 seconds where there's liquid on top and ice underneath. I tip the liquid away and photograph the remaining crystallography or the liquid crystal stage of ice that's on the dish. Now, as the ice is just beginning to form, it sends these little shoots out of ice. So there's still liquid in the water in the dish, but this ice starts coming out. And what's interesting is that I photographed it and filmed this, but it's hard to get the timing perfect. It's rare that I can get the timing just right. But I can see light coming out of the tip of the ice, and it looks like a halo. And there was a scientist that wrote that actually water is only one part matter, the two hydrogens and oxygen. The rest is actually photonic light, making water a lighthouse. So if water was the holy grail, its contents would be light. And so I think it's actually light that paves the way for the design and formative structure of the ice that's forming. So wherever there is light, water goes. There is always water and light. They are together. They are like a beautiful marriage. So anyway, that's kind of my 2 cents around that. But I do think that from Gennady Krokolev's work, so he was a Russian scientist and psychiatrist. It's very hard to find anything much out about him, sadly, anymore, because he rang his brother after doing a lot of the work he'd been doing, which I'll share in a minute, and said, I found something that's going to change the world. His brother rushed over. It took him 3 hours to get to Gennedy's house. Gennedy was found hanging, and then his work was confiscated or made, put into kind of confiscated. So it's very, very dubious as to whatever happened to Gennady Krokalev. However, Gennady had read this magazine called See the Other Way Around, which talked about the that there's the potential that when you are having a very clear vision in your mind's eye, that vision in your mind's eye essentially is projected out of the eyes like a hologram, which can be captured on camera. So he was working with psychiatric patients at the time who were having hallucinations and visions. And he set something up called a zenith camera. It's a black and white camera. It has a kind of long lens. He got a scuba diving mask, took the lens out of the scuba diving mask, and attached the rubbery part around the kind of long lens of the camera. And this was done in a very calm environment. I actually saw a video before I think was taken off the internet. I have a friend who's Russian that helped me find some information further than the typical searches. And there's an assistant. Janet is asking the patient, just tell me when you see something and tell me what you see. And the assistant is writing it down. And so these patients are having hallucinations. They believe that what they're seeing is real. And so after they'd written it down, he'd develop the photographs, and out of 200 patients that he worked with over 20 years, 117 of them were able to confirm that the black and white images that came from their mind-made pictures were in fact what they were seeing. This was repeated in the last 20 years by more Russian scientists, and they worked with someone who could remote view. And the scientists, they set the same deal up with the same kind of camera and the goggles, and the scientist stood behind a wall holding up numbers and shapes. And as she tuned into the numbers or the shapes, someone would take the photo of her eyes. And they were able to prove that this is a phenomena. In fact, all of the scientists did it. The only way it worked, though, was if you had a clear mental picture in your mind's eye. And there were two schools of thought. One was that perhaps there's a secondary realm of consciousness that we can't see, or, which was the second, which was more popular, the brain sends information to the retina of the eye, which is mostly this fourth phase, more plasmatic water. And that then translates that information into picture form, which is kind of what I'm seeing in my work, and projects it like a hologram, which can be captured on camera. And they made a documentary called something along the lines of Thought is Material, It's Proven. It's in Russian, but there's English subtitles. And the key for that was that you had this thought in your mind's eye. For my work, actually, the less you think and the more you feel, the better the result. So I'm working in an entirely different way, but phenomena is happening. And I'm not the only person, because I have now thousands of people doing my method and work. But we can probably get into a little bit more about that as we go on with this podcast.
Alrighty, guys, this conversation's about to get a whole lot more sacred and a whole lot deeper. The consciousness of water, Veda Austin. We're having conversations like this every week, twice a week, actually. Podcasts come out on the Inspired Evolution. Everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to the channel. I can't thank you enough to all of those that are subscribed. Thank you for your incredible love and support. And for those of you that haven't, please do take a moment out now. It helps everything we're doing here, championing positivity, love, and wisdom around the world. Your subscription is everything to this channel. So please do take a moment. There's a button just below. It says subscribe. If you can hit it, be forever grateful. Thank you so much for your love and support. Back to the episode. You also mentioned, in the book it says that the Hawaiians honor and remember that water holds instructions for evolution itself. Inner Earth carries this coding beginning before the beginning of the time on the earth, and water potentially existed before the earth. And it's such a beautiful contemplation because we sort of look at water, but we also identify very solidly as earth. And then all of a sudden it's like water is potentially even older, or than even the earth itself, through this like this mystical mythological telling. It's also quite profound also how watching your work open and expand at the moment, and just as we're tipping into this age of Aquarius as well, because we've gone from one state into another, and it seems like more of like this awareness is ripe for the picking for us right now. So the evolutionary impulse that is water is a big arc through the book. I'll just get you to speak to that. Yeah.
Well, if you know, pardon the pun, and you boil what it is to be alive down, or human down, for example, or any living being down, there's water, salts, minerals, and consciousness of some level, some awareness. Now, those three things are primordial in many ways. So the water, I mean, when we think of water, many people just think of it as a liquid. There's a liquid, solid, gas, and then a type of gel or plasma, which is more the kind of water inside of your cells. It's the kind of water that, an example would be aloe vera. That would be a fourth phase of water. It's stringy, it's more viscous, it's more stretchy. And so the secrets that are in the subtleties of all of those, we actually barely know anything much about water. If you ask a scientist what is water, they'll tell you it's H2O, two hydrogens and an oxygen. But on my search, and this will be relevant to your question, someone once said to me, but the two hydrogens are feminine in the mode of levity, and the large oxygen is masculine in the mode of gravity, and together they create balance in liquid on Earth. And then when you look at hydrogen itself, so my friend Isabel Friend, who did write, within the Water and God chapter of the book, which is actually quite a sciencey part that she's written. And she thinks she's of the belief that hydrogen is the spirit of water. I've really felt into that, and I don't know that I don't know that I agree, but I think that's the beautiful thing. We can all like think and feel into what feels right for us. But she has a lot of really interesting points. So logically, I can totally see it makes sense, because hydrogen literally means the creator of water, hydro, water, genesis. And then you have the sun, which is like, the hydrogen ball. So everything that's being evaporated is being taken back home. But when I think about it from my perspective, I think about the everything that is living that we understand at the moment is within a body of kinds. So the body is housing something. So we're a body of water, salts, minerals, and consciousness. But what's the house? What are we housing that is relative to spirit? And I think that the housing is holding light. So if I think personally with water and spirit, I think if water has spirit, then it would be condensed light. That's my gut feeling on it, because I know I was talking to Robert Edward Grant, and I've often said this for a very long time, but it was fun to hear somebody else say it, that the darkness, like dark, is just the full absorption of light. And so wherever there is dark or light, there is light on some level throughout the universe. And so wherever there is water, there appears to be light. And so when even the water in the air, we don't think about it. It's sort of like asking a fish, do you know if you're in water? And it's like, well, we don't really know what a fish would say, to be honest. But we tend to assume, we think maybe it doesn't realize, just like we don't think about that we are actually in air, but there's water in the air. The fact that we breathe out means there's water in the air. The water in the air is so important, because it actually has a relationship with us, has a relationship with the the electrical charge that we put out. And it's how essentially we're able to feel energy. So we have electrical charge that can go pretty far. It's not woo-woo. You can measure that by heart math. And the water and the air, or certain parts of it, are attracted to our electrical charge, giving us a web of liquid crystal information exchange of what's outside us, bringing it into the inside, and what's inside us, taking it out to the outside. So that's why we can feel into a room that's got a really dense and heavy energy, because it's that lasts longer, and our liquid antenna feels into it, brings that information into us as intuition, where we feel the answer. We don't think the answer necessarily. It's a gut feeling. And so that's why we can meet somebody and just feel like we've always known them, or we have an immediate, like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to have a vibe with you, because the patterning of our electrical charge mixed with this information exchange creates like a cymatic imprint around us, but it's three-dimensional. And the people we're most attracted to have a very similar patterning. And so when you're falling or rising in love, we tend to start mimicking the person, even their idiosyncrasies. We start flipping our hair a certain way, or we move our chin, or we do a thing, or whatever it is. And we don't realize it. That's how you know somebody's attracted to you quite often, is they start, automatically copying the way you hold your hand to your face, or, the way you're sitting and stuff. We kind of tend to have this mirroring. And I think water is a mirror of the divine. And by molecular count, not by volume, we're 99% water. In fact, there are more water molecules in our bodies than all of the stars in the perceivable universe. And yet, we're not even taught that at school. And so, and so, uh,
Whoa.
and the crazy part is that we just barely know anything about water, which means that we hardly know anything about ourselves or our own potential. And so when you go back into these, creation stories, and water is always there, it tends to be in relationship. It's like it's kind of like an emotional connection with earth. So earth and water, there's an intimacy there. Sometimes the rain is thought about as the tears, because the sky is missing the earth, and the tears come because the father misses the mother. And so the tears are the emotion that comes out of the sky. And some say, if you just go back into hydrogen, hydrogen is there seeding the universe, creating like environments where there is only just, it's like, honestly, this can be a whole hour of just going into that. But there's so much there. And then, you go into creation stories. And then it's like, even in the Bible, what is mentioned 722 times more than faith, love, and worship. In the very beginning, it says, the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep, or the face of the waters. And then there was sound. So it was like all the word. And so that's kind of creating a cymatic. You've got water, you've got light, you've got sound, you've got life. So these and then the ancient Egyptians, they talk about the primordial waters, and so this primordial water, this primordial soup, you hear that term, is all coming back to the waters. And water wasn't called water, it was called the waters in ancient English language, the waters. And then it was reduced to water when Romans made plumbing and people saw their waste being taken away. And now we reduce it further to H2O. And where the waters, or waters, are still used in our language outside of biblically, is when we say her waters broke, because we know that amniotic fluid is a sacred water. It is a sacred house for the life of the child. And I think that that ancestral information is actually, I've always thought this, is shared through the amniotic fluid into the child. It is a very, very information rich fluid, which is more in this fourth phase stage than it is like a water itself. So it's, yeah, there's a lot there.
Even back to what you were saying about um, yeah, dew in the morning, I couldn't help but sort of see it as like the levity of the drop kind of being this sacred offering that the earth is given back up to, to water. You mentioned potential. There's a really cool experiment with sunflower seeds. I'm not going to say anything about it. You tell us like potential sunflower seeds, but you couldn't image the seeds. I stopped talking over it.
So yeah, I mean, this has been, it's like all of my work comes from an organic what if this, what if that. So I thought, well, what will happen if I use seeds? Because I know a lot of biodynamic farmers, a lot of people are interested in gardening. What is the power of the seed? And even in ancient world, seeds are very important. If you consider that wood is probably the rarest form or rarest thing in the universe, wood. We're not seeing other planets. We might see water on other planets, but where are we seeing trees on other planets that we know
Yeah.
of right now?
Mm.
So imagine the power. Imagine how rare seeds are in the universe. And there's absolute power. Rudolf Steiner talks a lot about seed power. Anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. So I would get sunflower seed and put it into the water for 30 seconds. That's my kind of protocol time. It's not too long, it's not too short. Water is quantum, really. It's not needing to read something for like 4 hours to get a better impression of it at all. So I'll put the seed in for 30 seconds, remove, then freeze using my short-term freezing method. And rather than seeing an imprint of the seed in the ice, I see the potential of the seed. I see the entire sunflower in the ice. Then when I've done that with a flax seed, the flaxseed designs the pod of the flax, which is where the seed came from. It's like the fruit of the flax. Then when I used an apple seed, and interesting, I do this thing where I let the water melt after the crystallography is formed, and then refreeze it to see how long something will last. So I would put an apple seed into the water for 30 seconds, remove, and then freeze, and I see the outcome. I see the apple. Then I let that melt and refroze it the next day, and again I see the apple imprinted there. Then I let it melt and refroze it 3 days later, and I saw that the apple imprint was still there. And I've seen with biological things like human fluids or seeds, the imprint lasts for a long time throughout the water. Now, when I put an empty pistachio shell in the water with no nut and took it out and froze it, I saw the empty pistachio shell designed in the ice. So it didn't design the pistachio tree. So there's, interestingly enough, 10% water in even the oldest shriveled up seeds. And I think that the water inside the seed is what stores and holds the potential for its ultimate growth. It already has, it's a liquid blueprint,
Liquid
and
acorn. Yeah.
like a liquid acorn. And that's really, really important, because if you think that there are, so many trillions of water molecules in our bodies, each one knows our potential for our greatest outcome. It is only waiting for the right amount of light and the right amount of nurturing and the right amount of water, using it as an analogy, to step into that greatest potential. It's never there reading our worst potential at all. It's only there reading our greatest potential. And so I think we just need to start realizing that every water molecule in our body is working for our highest potential, and allow ourselves to get out of the way to let ourselves step into that and start to grow.
All right, guys, big question here. What is your relationship with water, and how is your relationship with water potentially changing thanks to this conversation? What are you taking away? Veda is incredible. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. It's so profound. And then also, like, because you also froze urine of individuals that were stressed, and then also an hour after meditation. And it really brought to mind there's this incredible, like, the highest potential in the water type, but then also there's this, it's almost like we're radiating the water and the potential and the frequencies that we're putting out in the world. Can you tell us a little bit about the stress and the meditation exercise?
Sure. Well, I've studied lots of fluids, including bodily fluids, from urine to tears to blood. These are kinds of things. And urine's really easy for people to work with. Obviously, just go pee in a petri dish. But what you can learn from that is really profound. So, working with someone who was highly stressed, as so many people have been and can be and are. And what we see is a lot of disorder within the urine crystallography. And then an hour after meditation, so we did that, so took that sample from that person that was very stressed. They went into a meditation for an hour, came back, we did another urine sample, and we saw that it was extremely structured. There was very clear formative patterns that we would see in what we would term as a healthy urine. So we saw in the bodily fluids great change. We did that also with on myself, where about a few years ago I was living out in Langs Beach. It was during lockdowns and all that stuff, and I developed a thyroid thing. Like I had a lump in my throat, and I understand the why, which I won't get into, and a lot of that's emotional stuff, but it was like really presenting, and I got really quite sick, and I ended up doing 8 intravenous ozone therapy sessions with a guy. They were amazing. I swear to God, I was better after doing them. The lump went away. My everything became normal again. But I did urine samples before and after the IV ozone, and I saw that it was. Do you know, it's interesting. The urine sample that I took when I was really, really sick looked just like the patterns or the lack of patterning that we see after water's been in a microwave. It was really, really like flatlined, almost like almost no pattern, which is very, very unusual. Then after my IV ozone, it had changed to become more floral-like. And I was like, okay, I can see my body's responding to this. I can see that there's change. And then when I kept checking it, because that lasts, the IV ozone lasts for a long time. So, the patterns continued to be positive days for the days that I tested it afterwards. So it was really an indicator to me. I could see change. So, I know, and my body's healed itself multiple times after a horrendous car accident. I was told I'd never be able to have children because of the amount of damage done to my um, internal organs and reproductive organs. Lots of scarring, not only from the car accident, but stage 4 endometriosis. So I had literally had a child for every doctor that told me I couldn't, and not out of defiance, but because they're all miracles. But I've had this knack of being able to put on the shelf what doctors have told me my body couldn't do, not ignoring them, not, I mean, nothing like that, but not bringing it on board either.
Not
It's on
turning
a
it into
shelf.
your belief system.
No, yeah. And so I always just left the potential open for anything. I've seen miracles happen. I feel like I see miracles happening every time I open my freezer. So why not they be miracles for me too? And I've seen that. So um, So anyway, with the urine, we've seen it for multiple different things, health related things where we've seen the differences. Um, not just from meditation, but after somebody's had a sound healing, after somebody's had Reiki. There's lots and lots of different examples where we see stress in the urine and then we see an improvement. But one thing we have also done with urine is that some people go, oh, what yuck, you're working with urine. But actually, when you do the sample, you're tipping all of this, a lot of the minerals away. So the yellow of the urine is being tipped away, and you're working with mostly water structure. And so we've been able to see that when you let the urine melt and then you project love, just like we do with water samples, is that the structures also improve in the urine, and you refreeze it. So you can see that the power of thought, loving intention, all of these different things does make a difference. And yes, I use controls. I've used many controls over the decade of doing this work. So and often it's tap water. And where I live, we're rural, so we get rainwater and we have tanks, so we don't have municipal tap water. So I go into Auckland City to my friend's house to get municipal tap water, and I collect it in a jar, and I keep it in the dark because water is very, very sensitive to light. I don't want it to be any worse than it already is structurally. So I'll use that tap water as my control because it shows very disordered patterning. So an example would be in the book where I have 4 examples of tap water. Two were, I have my control, and then I have one where you see the original tap water. I let it melt and I expose it to a singing bowl. The other one, I have the original tap water. I've let it melt and I didn't expose it to anything. And the only one you see where there's change is the one where I played the singing bowl, and the water structures have completely evolved, essentially. But water isn't changing chemically, it's just changing structurally. So, what is that? And I think what we're seeing is like an emotional change. It's like we're seeing the energetic health of water. And the fact that we are emotional water beings, it's like, well, is this a coincidence that we're seeing that water has an energetic state of health, given that it's within all life forms? I probably think that's, yeah, it would be. It seems like an unlikely coincidence. That I don't think it's a coincidence. I do think that water and emotion um, relate to one another. That's why you have all these words, the watery words for how you're feeling. I feel like I'm just drowning in the weight of the world, or I feel like this, or I feel like that, or I feel like there's too many to think about right now. But it's interesting the way what we're seeing. The only change I've seen, a kind of chemical change, is where I've had tap water next to spring water, and the spring water had a really naturally high pH of 9.9, and the tap water was about a 6.5 in pH. And I did the controls, and what I saw was that the tap water, once I refroze it, you see that it's improved structurally by sitting next to the spring water. So the tap water improved by sitting next to the spring water. But the spring water structures even improved too. They improved. So why did the spring water improve? And I think it's because where there's purpose, that's the difference. There's purpose. There's a need. There's like, oh, I need to help. That
Giving.
is actually helping improve you whenever you think
Giving
that.
elevates us. What the?
Yeah, but the chemical part was where I actually had tested the pH of both, and the tap water, just by sitting next to the spring water, had improved and gone up to a neutral pH, gone up to a 7 from a 6.5. So its pH had gone up, that the pH of the spring water had changed. It stayed the same, sorry. So we're seeing information exchange where the most cohesive is impacting positively the least cohesive. And this is the power of water.
Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally, and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines.
He's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing, and Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him, and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate, because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately, one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive. And yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. You went through a massive journey of healing of your own. Like you mentioned lightly, the car accident, but that was no small feat. And is that really where the relationship with water, like the bond, really started to acclimate? Like, is that really where you started to dive in deeper? Pardon the pun. Sorry.
It was a series of events, really, that what happened from that. So, yeah, I was in a horrendous car accident over 20 years ago now. We went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice, and the driver died immediately. And to this day, I think it's still considered one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone managed to survive. I was the passenger. There was no one else in the car except for him and me. And over the course of 20 odd years, I had 8 surgeries, and three of them were for bowel surgery because the seatbelt had crushed my internal organs and left scar tissue on my small bowel. So that scar tissue continued to grow. So every time I'd try to eat food, it would only get so far, and then I would be vomiting it back up. So it was an incredibly awful situation and very painful. The rest of the surgeries were like smashed collarbone and also for endometriosis, so a variety of things. On my 8th surgery, I went in for bowel surgery. They put a stent in my small bowel. I was in surgery a long time. When I woke up, there were doctors around me, and they were like, well, you didn't recover well. You now have showers of blood clots in your lungs, and you might have to be on warfarin for the rest of your life. I'm like, what the heck? You know, it's pretty outside of my car accident stuff and the endometriosis. My diet was good, my health was good, my energy was good. You know, I was a teetotaler. So, you know, it was always a surprise. It was a very big surprise to me. And they said, well, if you don't do this, you're going to die. So I did for several months. I took warfarin, which is a blood thinner. And at the end of it, I went and had another chest X-ray, which was clear. and no one could tell me exactly why it happened, because they weren't 100% sure. But there was talk of me having it for the rest of my life, and I wasn't going to have that. I didn't want that. I believe we're all entitled to making our own choices for our own bodies. This is definitely not medical advice. I'm not recommending people go and do what I did. Everybody's situation is different. But for me personally, I'd already seen that my body could heal. They didn't really know what happened. It was most likely the kind of surgery it was and the length of time I was under anesthetic. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to be the guinea pig of my own health. I'm going to make sure that whatever I do, I'm going to find the most natural ways to keep my body healthy. I was a very determined person. And by that time, I had also had children. So I wanted to make sure I was going to be around for them. And so I ended up speaking to a friend of mine who's a medical doctor, but also practiced Ayurvedic medicine, was both medical and holistic. And he said, well, off the record. And like, mate, why off the record? And he said, it's just that this isn't fully like medically accepted yet. I was always happy he said yet. I'm like, well, he said, if you can find a natural, emphasis on natural, I'm not talking about ionized water, naturally alkaline water, it might help to bring your body back into some balance. And so I was like, okay, let me go try that. Didn't sound so hard. In New Zealand, there's heaps of springs that are naturally alkaline. Anything above a 7 is naturally alkaline. So I started putting myself on 2-week trials with naturally alkaline water that I would either buy or collect. And nothing much happened. I mean, I was felt hydrated, so there's that, but we're this body and we can't see all the inner workings of it. And so that's kind of makes it difficult. The only places where we see that we're liquid on an everyday, just face-to-face basis is through our eye lens. Our eye lens is 99% highly ordered structured water. And saliva, although we don't normally see that. We're not dribbling everywhere unless we're babies. And so, I was seeing that yes, I was feeling hydrated, but I didn't notice anything. I'm like, I don't really know what I'm expecting to see, if anything. And then by this stage, I had a wellness center because I have some gifts of healing. I no longer have that center. That was a long, long time ago. And this client came and said, I know this old guy who's got his own private source of naturally alkaline water. It's 9.9 pH out of the ground, and he's only giving it to cancer patients. You might want to try. So I spoke to him, and he gave me a month's worth to try. And within 3 days, I noticed a change in something so many people don't talk about, especially in the West. In India, it was a well-conversed topic, which is about bowel motions. And, it's such an indicator of our internal health. There's so many people sitting on the toilet for an hour trying to push out a pebble. And that's just a big indicator of dehydration. Or sometimes it can be something else, but it's commonly dehydration. And so I'm like, oh, there's an improvement happening here. This is good news. There's something changing. And then on day 10, something quite dramatic happened. I had all these bumps coming up on my arm and jaw that were particularly painful.
Yeah.
And there was one which was really painful. And so I ended up getting these tweezers and like picking something out. It was like a little bit of green glass came out of my arm. And between day 10 and 12, I'd picked 27 pieces of green glass shards out of my arm. And they'd been in my body for over 20 years because the guy who died in the car accident owned a nightclub, and in the back of the car seat there were crates of Steinlager beer, which is a lager in a green glass bottle. And when the car rolled, my right side got more green glass and the left side got more windscreen. And the nurses spent 3.5 days picking glass out of me. I have 17 scars on the top of my head. When I went in the shower, most of my hair came out because it was cut with glass everywhere. There was so I figured there was probably still some glass left in me, but I had no idea that this was a possible thing. How can drinking water purge you like that? That
Oh,
led me on to trialing it on other people. Interestingly, people from my wellness center, everybody's eyesight improved. And that was fascinating to me. And then we had people who were very, very healthy athletes who got that incremental little extra bit of energy, all the way to somebody who had stage 4 cancer. He did a 27-day water fast, and he lived in Coromandel. And halfway through the fast, they found the tumor was reduced by half. And then 3 weeks after the fast, he went back to the hospital and they called it spontaneous healing. They couldn't find any cancer in his body. And he was doing the inner work. You cannot take away from the power of that. I'm not saying it was just the water. These are things that people told me about, shared with me, and what's interesting though, just to give it a little bit more credibility, is that even though that man, he ended up selling the property and I wasn't able to get the water from him, there is some beautiful people who in the last year started a company using the same water, and they have access to the same aquifer, just a little bit along. It's a huge underwater aquifer, and there's a bed of quartz underneath it, and it's very, very special. And so they have access to it, and they consider themselves to be the kaitiaki of that land. So they're not like big business. They're putting beautiful healing words within the boxes of water that they are filling. They came to me and asked, what's the best protocol to do this? I said, make sure you keep it out of the light. Anyway, all of this is going on. So it's the same water that helped heal me, but they are going forward now with clinical trials around, I think it was a woman who had a liver issue and started to regrow her liver after drinking the water. And so they're starting to really look at some more scientific evidence as to why it's happening and what makes that water different. And now, when I had it tested for 4th phase water, and you can test for it. There's different ways you can test for it. So my work in crystallography is very helpful, because what we see with that water is it shows very big crystalline hexagonal patterns. But if you're looking for 4th phase water in a lab, you get some of the water in a little container, and you put a Naphion tube, which is like a see-through tube, and then you put something called microspheres that allows you to see movement in the water. And then you look down a microscope, and what you'll see, if there is 4th phase water in there, is that those microspheres will be literally seen self-propelling through the tube with absolutely no help from the outside arena. And why does that happen? Well, 4th phase water has different properties. It absorbs more light. It has negative charge, which is why healthy cells are negatively charged. It is viscous, so it's kind of got more stretch to it, and it has an ordered molecular structure. So, and a really important piece is it's negatively charged. So why is it self-propelling? Well, Dr. Jerry Pollack, who is one of the leading water scientists in the world, talks about something called exclusion zone. He calls this 4th phase water exclusion zone, or easy zone, because it pushes out all of the things that is in the water, the solates, pushes it out of itself, which that creates a negative charge of pure water. Outside of itself is now a positive charge with all of the things that are in the water. And when you have a negative and a positive, you have a battery. So this type of water is the battery of your cells. And healthy cells have that negative charge. The earth is negatively charged, which is why walking barefoot on the ground, you're absorbing that negative charge.
Ions, of course. Yeah.
So this is all very helpful. So I had that water tested and as well, and we can see that there is exclusion zone in the water. And it's not surprising, because exclusion zone builds under pressure. So this was water from a very deep aquifer. So, I had this healing experience, and that then led me on to asking the question, like, what makes this water different than other waters? And I go to an analysis and I see, okay, there's bicarb in there. There is, this amount of total dissolved solids. There's da 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 da. And is it the high pH? Is that what it is? Is it, what is it? And all the while I start to realize that there's probably something more than that. Most likely, it's not necessarily what's in the water, although I'm sure that there is aspects of that helped. But when you look at an analysis, all it tells you is what the water is holding, not what water is. And that then made me go into the question of like, well, what is water? And then you look at Nikola Tesla saying, well, if you want to know the secrets to the universe, look at frequency, energy, and vibration. I'm like, well, how do I know that about water? And then I started looking into Indigenous wisdom. My father is native New Zealand Maori. His name's Bill Hohepa, best known for his giant moustache and giant eyebrows and flamboyant kind of nature. And he did us all these kind of fishing videos and very kind of, this kind of thing. He also does, makes the Maori fishing calendar, which is based on the cycles of the moon. And, then you go into water being considered to be a living being, like an ancestor. The Whanganui River was the first river in the world to be given rights of personhood. It can literally vote. But it's cared for by the tribe, the Whanganui tribe. That means literally that it is considered to be a living person, a living being, and has rights of nature, essentially. And that's a really special thing, where that tribe fought so hard to get that river to be stopped from having its mouth being filled with effluents, its belly being like absolutely ripped apart because they were taking the gravel away, by the headwaters being diverted, which is considered to them as aquatic decapitation, as the head is considered the most sacred part of the body. And so over years of going through the courts, they were able to get their river to have rights of personhood. So as you go through all of this, then that led me on to the questioning of, well, yes, I can look at the science, and there's the new science of water. That's where you're going to get a lot more answers. Really, that's that area of liquid crystal, fourth phase water. That's the area I'm working in. It's a subtle layer. It's subtle information, which is very, to me, a very spiritual conversation. I don't consider what I'm doing experimenting. I'm a body of water that doesn't want to be experimented on. I'm seeing that water is responding, not reacting to me. I have over 54,000 photos of water responding in an intelligent manner. That's more than enough evidence to say that I have one hydroglyph. So I found that water communicates, if you will, in 3 ways. A signature pattern that allows you to see the type of water it is. So spring water collected and frozen within a couple of hours shows a very specific large hexagonal pattern. Rainwater forms a fanning pattern. Municipal tap water tends to be very disordered. Seawater is really cool. It designs, like, you see all these little indentations, and they look like tiny little subwoofers with stars inside. So you start to see the signature patterns. Filtered water looks like, like what's it called? The type of teeth that some whales have that can only kind of have that plankton that sieves through. That looks a little bit like these compacted lines, right? So that's a signature pattern. Then you have the art. It's where water's taken on the artistic impression of an object or a thought or a thing. That's what I'm most well known for. So I was studying to become an archaeologist, and then I had children. Then I was doing research and development for an area relating to water. But I also throughout all of that worked professionally as an oil painter. So I have this very kind of multi-dimensional, I guess, different facets of my personality come out with what I do. But because I see the world through an artistic lens, and actually, because our islands is 99% water, we literally see the world through the lens of water, then I don't think it's a surprise that water relates to me artistically. And then there is hydroglyphs, and that's separate to all of those. So essentially, a hydroglyph is just a term that I use for a symbol in ice that repeats. And to say that I have one of these symbols, I need to have seen it repeat at least 50 times to say that I have one, right? And so I use words as my inspirations, and I'll use the same word in different languages. So I'll write the word, put my dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds, remove. And if I see that same pattern appear multiple times, then I call that a hydroglyph with the energetic meaning of that word. So it's, again, not like water's reading words, but it's picking up on the energy of that word, reverse engineering it back to some kind of living principle that we can see, we can photograph, we can touch, but not only that, we can eat. And this was taught to me by my children as a liquid crystal medicine. My daughter Shanti, when she was around about eight, was watching me photograph the dish. And it was particularly beautiful. And she said, "Mummy, can I have that?" I gave it to her. And she started to eat the ice. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And she says, "It's good for me, Mummy." And then same thing with her brother. A few weeks later, same thing he did. He said that it was good for him. He didn't say why. It was nothing to do with his sister. And as I've been teaching so many people now around the world how to do this technique, which is a very simple technique, lots of them are parents, and they say, "My children are eating the ice." And I'm like, "Really? What do these children know that we don't know?" And I realize we've been speaking for a while now, so I won't get into the longer story, but we've discovered that there is a potency in the word. And when you write a word, say you have having insomnia, and you write a word that comes from the well of knowledge within you. Now, that word could be rest, but it could be something that might not have anything to do with it. It might seem illogical, but it just comes out. It's the right word. You know it's the right word. For example, I had a headache. What's my word? It was purple. I'm like, wrote the word purple, ate the ice, and within 5 minutes, my headache literally had gone. And I don't get many headaches. So that was shocking for me. Then, so we've had lots of people with an insomnia, and this one lady wrote rest, and she would eat the ice for a week every day. And by the end of that week, she slept for the first time through the night, and the first time in 4 years. We had one lady, Rachel Tudor, who had a vaccine injury, let's say, and she had an autoimmune response, or perhaps got autoimmune problems because of it. I'm not entirely sure. She had lots of issues, unable to walk even at one stage, brain fog, like the whole, really, really lethargic, everything. So she started to eat the ice, use a word every day, eat the ice no matter what it looked like. And what was so fascinating about her, she started with the word connection. She stayed with the word connection for a month, and then as she started to heal, the words changed and evolved. I did a live with her on my Instagram. It's kind of far down my Instagram, but you can find it. And she has a big list of all of the words she used over 9 months. And you see that there is a structural, so her tap water started out kind of a bit disordered. She was using filtered tap water. By the end of her relationship, of her doing this for 9 months, she was getting what we call the creation hydroglyph each time. And that is what looks like one of the most formative, beautiful, wave-like patterns. That it's just one of my favorite patterns that she was seeing in tap water. So not only was she healing, but her tap water was healing with her. And she ends up then having a complete bill of health. Now, she was doing some formative movement with her arms and various different things, and she was also doing the internal work. Again, I don't want to take away from all those things, but there seems to be a common denominator going on. And so this is not, there are no clinical trials, I have to say that, nothing like that. But hey, this is one of the most simple, fun, easy things you can do. You don't even have to get a glass petri dish. Many people are starting to use like glass baking trays, like a Pyrex glass baking tray. You just need to have a very thin layer of water in your dish. You can learn how to do it. It's on my website. If you put the word blessing in the code as you check out, it's free. But it's just about knowing what it looks like in the freezer. So you need to have liquid on top and ice underneath, and you need to take it out when there's that ice you see. You tip the liquid away, and then you can either photograph it or you can just eat it. And so there's quite a big difference between drinking liquid water that's got words on the bottle, which is kind of like an everyday, wonderful, relational kind of thing, compared to having water in a liquid crystal form. It's pushed all out so that the solids out, so it's in this exclusion zone form. So we know that it's the healthiest state of water. And when I talked about the 3 ways water shares information or communicates, there's also 3 ways that water freezes. I think of them as spirit, blood, and body. There's the stage I take the water out. There's the stage that's like a nice sandwich with liquid in the middle, and then there's a solid. And so we're working on a spirit level with the water. It's sharing, it's got a visual voice, and it's water communicating with water. You're a body of water that is sharing information with another body of water through the messenger of light. And that is what's going on. So this is liquid crystal medicine, really. I mean, that's the term I'm using. It's again, no clinical trials, but hey, everybody can do it and it's free. So you got nothing to lose.
I find it absolutely amazing, this whole intention, like you've got this water and intention in the word blessing, like the relationship of how like already the hydroglyphs is a whole totally. I'll put a link to the website so people can go check out what we're talking about. But yeah, the hydroglyphs, like the actual like water has a language that it's trying to communicate back to us in almost Egyptian symbology kind of vibes. And then we've also like it's talking to us, and then also our ability to set an intention emanate into it. And like you said, even just writing a word and sticking it under a petri dish, and that just sort of like pops in. It is so fascinating to think about. Well, the initial impulse is to sort of think about water as alive as us, right? And then, like you said, we are water, and then it's like, of course it is us. But in some ways, I think even more alive, in fact, like a source giver, like a life giver, like a, I think that really opens up some true reverence for the gift that is the water.
Yeah, I don't think of water as a resource. I do think that water is source. My dear friend Kalani Souza says that water is not a resource, it's a relative. So we can start seeing water from different perspectives. And one of the terms I hear a lot is we can program it. We can program the water. And every time I'm like, oh God, no, this is not what it is. This is not what it is. Because we have to get past it's we talked about things being upside down. To me, that's upside down. Because we've been as we talk about programming, I don't, do you want to be programmed? We're all kind of programmed in many ways, even if we might not want to admit it.
You just remove a few. Yeah.
But so to program the water to do what we want, that always seems so a selfish way to approach things. Because the best, people always say, what's the best water to drink? And it's such a, oh God, it's such a thing. It's not about what the best water to drink is. If you're lucky enough to have water in your glass, drink that. That water, there's only 2% of drinking water on the surface of Earth. And I'm not talking about the primary water inside the Earth's mantle. There's 2% of drinking water on the surface of Earth, and it has found its way to your cup. It has a message for you. It has been through the trees and the clouds and the mountains and the bees and the birds and your ancestors, and it has come to knock on the door of your mouth to enter, to become you. It's not about what that water is going to do for you, but what kind of environment do you want that water to enter into so that it can be free enough to share its wisdom with you and yours with it. Your saliva is such a huge percentage of water. It is the first fluid any food or water or drink comes into contact with. And it holds the resonance of the last word and sentence you spoke. So that's the welcoming committee. Are you grateful? Are you thankful? Or are you just completely ignoring the ancestor at your door? And I truly have seen that the biggest healings that people have had have not come from the most pristine waters in the world. It's come from their relationship with the water in front of them and how they receive it.
I'm just going to give that a moment to land. That is, because I think that's the question that's on everybody's lips is like, which water do I drink? And actually, it's how do you show up for and with water? Yeah. Just a quick question down like a sort of less reverent slope, I guess, is we throw a lot of our waste into the water in different parts of the world at the moment, and we are polluting the waterways. Your thoughts, your insights, your relationship with how human beings are sort of doing that collectively at the moment. Yeah.
I think it can be overwhelming when we think about what's going on in the world. Like, it can be overwhelming when we think, what can we do? When there is pollution, there is destruction, there is war. And overwhelming is not a helpful energy for humans to have. So I always bring it back into what can we do now? And I did some work with egg albumin. And egg albumin is and it's like seems so random saying that and then this, but it will make sense soon. So with egg albumin, it's when you just carefully crack open an egg a little bit and a thin saliva-like part of the egg white comes out, not the gloopy gelatinous part. So when you freeze that saliva-like part of the egg white, it's called albumin. I've identified that there are 6 formative patterns that happen that appear organically. I'm not projecting consciousness or any of those things. It's just how they look in free-range, fresh eggs. Now, I can only see 2 of the most primitive of the 6 patterns appear in caged hen eggs. So I decided to put one beside the other and leave them overnight based off Luc Montanua's work, which was too long for us to get into. But if you Google him and DNA teleportation, his work is incredible. Please ignore all of the stuff that talks about him being a pseudoscientist. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for discovering AIDS. Why would he put himself into a position where suddenly he's just telling a load of fibs? I got to meet him before he died. He was a very serious scientist using very serious scientific methods. His work was repeated. He was a pioneer, and I really, really think he guided the way forward. He was essentially able to see that DNA could transport itself into an empty glass, into empty test tube, essentially, by putting a 7 hertz frequency, exposing it to ambient light for 17 hours and within a copper coil. Then one test tube had DNA, one didn't. And then they took the precursor to see whether there is any DNA within anything. And they were able to see then the empty test tube, just by being beside it with that environment, there was a sequence of DNA that essentially matched the one it was sitting next to. So I got a free range egg and a caged hen egg, and I put them side by side. And I did controls. And I left them overnight. And the free range egg showed the beautiful, very specific patterns that I would always see. It didn't change. But the cage 10 egg had started to improve and had at least 3 or 4 new structures that I'd never seen in cage 10 eggs. So that was really interesting. I shared it on social media and people were like, yeah, that's really cool. But what if you're surrounded by bad eggs? It's going to go bad. So I did that multiple times. So I put a free range egg in the middle and at the same batch of cage 10 eggs all around it. And I left them overnight and I did controls. Now, the cage 10 egg, the free range egg, it stayed the same structurally, but there was healing by proximity for the cage 10 eggs. All of the eggs that were the closest to the free range egg improved so significantly that they were almost indistinguishable from a free range egg. And the ones that were furthest away improved, but not as much. And what we're seeing here literally is if you heal yourself, you naturally start to heal others. When you see that the tap water, which has disorder, it has chemicals in it. So many people around the world can't drink tap water anymore without it being filtered, and even then. But we see structural improvement. So I think of tap water like a sick person. But that sick person has the power inside of them, the potential inside of them to heal themselves. They also have the power, their own power to feel their own emotions. So it's up to them if they're happy or sad. So you can have a sick person that somebody might come and make them a cup of tea and give them a blankie and care for them. That person will naturally feel grateful and feel just a little bit happier, like they're being cared about. It's a feeling, right? That's an important feeling. But a doctor might say, well, you've still got cancer or you're still sick. So the tap water is still tap water, but what we're seeing is structural change, but not chemical change yet, anyway. So that is the same as seeing that a sick person is feeling better. Now, anyone on a natural healing journey might agree that the best place to start your healing journey was with an attitude of gratitude. And because we're seeing structural formative change in the water, that could translate as the beginning of the change towards health in a person.
Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines. And
He's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing, and Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive, and yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. Wow. And so the invitation being doing your own work, healing your own self, enlightening and enlivening and building your relationship with water is everything is, well, pardon the pun, downstream from there, because then we're not in that overwhelmed state, and actually we have that ripple effect of empowerment when it comes to our relationship with water.
I think yes, and one of the things I would say is that water is different things to different people. But if we start actually feeling like we care about it, like we have some kind of relationship with it, we start to see that the water outside of us is also can be the water inside of us. If our skin was invisible and our organs were see-through, what would we look like? We would look like rivers and streams and tributaries and waterfalls. We're only a cut away from leaking, and we're an emotion away from leaking. And if we care about this life force energy that we call water, then we ourselves will take responsibility to care for it outside of ourselves. And I think just in the same way that there's only such a short, small percentage of 2% of water that's drinkable, that's not saline, I think we only need 2% of people around the world to truly see this, to see it make a great wave of change. And the young people, if they grow up caring for water, and we start using water as technology, and water does not resonate at a lower frequency because it will not design formatively for me whatsoever. If I'm angry or frustrated, I can't trick it. It is like a lie detector test. If the young people start caring for it, start seeing this as an expression of themselves outside of themselves, and bring this renaissance back about the caring of water, then they are the brilliant ones. Just as the children taught me about eating the ice, the children will find a way. But we need to help them. We need to give them an environment where they can grow and remind us of what and who we are and how we can help this water world. And we don't want to take away from that person who can heal themselves. I know water can heal too. It is always going to evaporate at some point. It doesn't die, which means that we have an element within us, a life force energy within us that transitions only but never dies. You put salt into water, it disappears. You take the water away, it evaporates. Hello, there's the salt with the formative structure. When somebody is cremated, the ashes are salts. Again, we're made of water, salts, and consciousness. It's transition upon transition upon transition. So when we start looking at the overwhelming thing of pollution of water, of course we need to be able to make change. We even, I watched this very moving video of Coco the gorilla who's learned how to do signing. And she says she loves man, but man is stupid. Man needs to care for the earth. He's killing the earth. Even the gorillas know, the animals know. We are nature too. Just in the same way that we've now made a massive, a whole business out of selling water, we're also selling ourselves in every moment we do that. Whenever we do this, I see that there is the coin hydroglyph in the water that has been bought. There is an awareness of that. So I think starting in simplicity, where we've got to start somewhere. So when people start working with the water using my method, for example, and there are many other ways, there's something shifts inside of you. It's like, gosh, there's something here. And then you start seeing other water. We've got a stream down the end of our garden. And you get to see all its moods and all its different ways, and the little animals and eels that live in there. You start noticing things more, and then you start caring more. And when you care for something, you look after it. And it's on us, each and every person, to do something that we can do, rather than feeling overwhelmed, because the overwhelm takes the energy of what we can do away. And so I think that within some of that, hopefully that's resonated for somebody.
I've got a bit of a trippy question, because you're discovering the secret intelligence of water. There's a language in there. There's hieroglyphs. What do you think water would want to say to humanity? Is that a question I can ask? I know it's very presumptuous of you as being like a priestess in the temple. What does God want to say? But I wanted to ask the question nonetheless.
Someone once said to me, in a roundabout way, and I'll answer it in my own way, what if water is sharing its consciousness, or expressing its consciousness through us and every living thing, to observe itself from every different perspective? But I tend to think in more personal terms, and I watch that water always starts, from the mountains, and it makes its way through all different types of tributaries. It's branching out so much, like trees and water have such a lot in common. Anyway, that branches out, but it's always going back to the sea. The water is always going back home. We're all going back home. We get to choose which tributary that is. Water is not in judgment. It's never judging you. Someone said, oh God, we're seeing all of the structural improvements and changes and everything like this, in your work. Why can't all the nefarious leaders of the world, can't the water inside of them start doing something to make them be better, or something like this? Or why doesn't it just stop working? And it was a very kind of, there was a lot of emotion behind the message. And I had to remind them that water's not in judgment. Water will enter the body of anybody who is thirsty if it's there. It's not saying, oh God, no, I don't like the look of you, or I don't like what you did or what you've done. I'm not going to enter your body. It's there for you. It will enter the body of a homeless person, a king, a butterfly, any animal, any bird, any plant that needs it, if it's there. It's available for all, even those that have done terrible things. And I know that in the world there is many horrible things going on, but by the hand of man. But water is not the hand. Water is the seed in the heart of all people, where there is hope that change can happen.
I learnt recently on this podcast that the opposite of love is not actually hate, and that the opposite of love is judgment. And so water being judgment-free makes water love. That's really beautiful. Thank you so much for that. It's really, feeling into, I was introduced to this concept a little while ago that, trees don't really have legs and they can't really walk around and move. And so, they want to lay down roots and stuff like this, and they want to exist and breathe. And so they've kind of created humans to go and labor and toil. Trees might just be cultivating humans rather than us thinking it's actually the other way around. Like you said, things are a bit backwards. And this conversation and studying your work, and I'll put a link to several things in the show notes below for everybody to go check out, not least of all your website, the book. Incredible book, really nice, well put together. Love the cover as well and all the photos. I love how all your skill sets is also like just sort of coalesced into like this expression of like water exploration. It's or communication. It's phenomenal. But yeah, also looking at like that tree conversation, that water is just this, well, not just, but it's animating us. It's animating everything around us. Everything is animate thanks to the blessing that is water. And really just connecting to the flow, as cheesy as that may sound. It's really a gift, and just the aliveness of it, Veda, and how alive this work is for you, and just the way you're carrying it for all of us. I'm so grateful for your time, your energy, your blessings here today, and there's like at least 6 other conversations that sort of opened up that need to be had at some point. But yeah, seriously, thank you so much for you, and not just the work you're doing, not just today's conversation, but as you said, like your own healing journey. There's a point where you're picking glass out of your skin and you don't know that this is where it ends up at some point, right? It's like everything we're discussing stands on the shoulders of your trials, your tribulations, and your experiences, and your wisdom that you've found along the way, and all your inspirations as well. So thank you to all of that, and just want to honor you for you doing you. Thank you so much for doing this with us here today.
Oh, I received that with so much love. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yo. All right, guys, as I said, everything is going to be in the show notes below for you to take your journey further. I highly recommend you go check out what a hydroglyph is. It is going to blow your mind. Veda also has an incredible YouTube channel where she interviews other people that are going deeper into this exploration of water and sacredness. She mentioned Isabella before. There's a really great conversation on her channel with that as well. I'll put links to everything in the description below. Alrighty, Inspired Tribe, you've made it through to the end of another incredible episode. I can't believe all the estuaries within which we got carried down into this conversation, and yet so much more to be had in the conversation around water. I'm sure this conversation is changing your consciousness, your awareness around water. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below how, what, and why is shifting for you in this conversation, and what your relationship with water really is. On screen in a couple of moments are going to be a couple of episodes for you to be able to continue your inspired evolution journey and go take the journey further. But just before we get there, just a friendly reminder and an invitation. Everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to the channel. If you can, please take a moment to hit subscribe to the channel. It helps so much. And I'm so grateful to all of you that are subscribed to the channel. Your love, your support is everything. Thank you so much for your incredible love and support. Now, as promised, on screen, opportunities to go further. There's a conversation here with Julia Ross, an incredible conversation on health and wellness around how we don't have certain amino acids, and that actually leads to most of the mainstream mood disorders that people actually experience. And you can just get 5 household amino acids into your system, and they can actually transform your entire relationship with your mind and your mood. Another couple of episodes on screen as well for you to dive deeper. One of them with Pam Gregory, an incredible astrologer who also led me to Veda's work. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Can't wait. Go on, pick your adventure. I'll see you there.